Hello travelers, it's been a long day for you already. You can now rest here, listen to funny histories, to drift off to sleep. Tonight, we will dive into the topic why you wouldn't last a day in the prehistoric time, and many more. Let's begin. Welcome to the prehistoric era, where the Wi-Fi is non-existent, the fashion is exclusively mammoth hide chic, and every rock might be your next toothbrush, weapon or dinner plate. You, dear listener, have just been dropped into a world where your Fitbit steps include running for your life, and breakfast isn't avocado toast, it's a raw root you dug up with your bare hands while a giant sloth gave you side-eye. Congratulations, you've already stubbed your toe, caught hypothermia, and made eye contact with a saber-toothed cat. And it's not even noon. Before we continue on, leave a comment down below to let me know where you are from and what time you are listening to this. Also leave a like and subscribe to the channel, but only if you enjoy what I do here. So here you are, somewhere in the deep fog of prehistory. No metal tools, no language as you know it, no toilet paper, just you, a couple of stone tools, and a group of early humans who are side-eyeing you like you've just sneezed during a hunt. You are the weakest link in this tribe. You don't know how to make fire, you don't know how to hunt, you don't even know how to grunt correctly. You are, for all intents and purposes, prehistoric dead weight. Food, you think it's a matter of ordering something. No, in this world, food involves identifying a vaguely edible plant, hoping it's not poisonous, chewing through it like a nervous goat, and praying it doesn't cause immediate organ failure. Your other option, chase a terrified rabbit with a sharp stick while barefoot in the mud, and try not to cry. Sleeping arrangements. The cave is taken by the alpha male and the firemaker. You get the corner, no blanket, no pillow, just rocks, cold air, and the creeping realization that your sleeping bag back home was a beautiful, beautiful lie. And let's not even talk about medicine. If you get a cut, you slap some mud on it, and hope it doesn't evolve into a personality. If you break a bone, well, it's been nice knowing you. The local healer is just a guy with a bone necklace who rubs pine sap on things, and occasionally chants at the moon. Oh, and you're always being watched. Not just by your tribe, but by the wilderness itself. The sky could drop hail the size of your ego. The rivers are freezing. The birds sound suspiciously judgmental. And that rustle in the grass. That's either dinner or something that wants you to be dinner. The sun hasn't even risen yet, but your new tribe is already awake, grunting, stretching and scratching themselves with the grace of angry bears. You, however, are curled up in the fetal position in your cold dirt corner, covered in a pelt that smells like yesterday's hunt and regret. Your back hurts, your neck hurts, something is crawling on your leg, and it might be edible, but you're too tired to find out. You try to blend in, hoping no one notices you're useless, but you stand out like a hairless mole rat at a lion convention. You're soft, cleanish, you've still got all your teeth, and none of the grit. A child hands you a rock and gestures for you to help with the morning grind. Literally, you are now in charge of crushing nuts and seeds into a sort of gritty paste. It's the prehistoric version of oatmeal, except there's no milk, no sugar, and possibly a few stray insects. Breakfast is shared in silence, not because it's a peaceful moment, but because nobody's invented small talk yet. You make the mistake of speaking, "Hey, does anyone want to?" And before you can finish, a man twice your size smacks you gently with a stick. Not aggressively, just enough to say, "Shah." We grunt here. You eat not of the people, though they are a little terrifying, but of the food. You bite into something root-like and woody. It tastes like earth and mild despair. It's technically edible, but so is cardboard. You chew through it like a loyal dog, chewing a stick, occasionally making eye contact with another tribe member who's gnawing on a chunk of meat, like it wronged their ancestors. Then someone stands up, grabs a crude spear made from a sharpened stick, and gestures to the forest. Time to hunt. You're going to help. You weren't consulted. You weren't trained. You're just included now, like a group project where your only job is don't die. So now you're walking through dense brush, barefoot, freezing, and holding what might generously be described as a weapon, but looks more like a dangerous twig. Around you, your prehistoric companions move silently, alert, agile, and completely in tune with the natural world. You, on the other hand, are breathing like you just ran a marathon through a sandstorm. The hunt begins. You see an animal, some kind of deer or prehistoric gazelle thing. It's majestic. You're instructed to help flank it. Instead, you step on a stick, fall in the mud, and let out a noise that can only be described as panic honk. The deer bolts. The hunters sigh. Someone mutters a grunt that probably translates to, "This is why we don't let the new guy come." But it's not over. You push deeper into the forest, trying to redeem yourself. The group moves like shadows, blending with the trees, reading signs in the dirt, following broken branches and droppings. You pretend to understand what's going on. You nod when someone points at a footprint. "Yes," you say confidently, even though you're just staring at a rock. Then suddenly, a boar, huge, tusked, angry, and running straight at the group. Chaos erupts. Spears fly. People shout. You scream something in English, which is useless, and fall backward into a bush. Somehow, the boar is brought down. The tribe celebrates. You lie on the ground with twigs in your hair, and the haunted look of someone who just saw their entire life flash before their eyes. You helped. Kind of. Mostly by distracting the boar with your terrified flailing. But no one's mad. You didn't die. You've now officially contributed to the survival of the group. You might even get a bite of meat tonight instead of just moss and sadness. The sun dips low as you return to camp, dragging your exhausted, bruised, mud-caked body behind the rest of the hunting party. Everyone's buzzing with primitive pride. You? You look like you lost a fight to the forest and your dignity didn't make it. The boar is dropped in the center of the clearing like a prehistoric feast centerpiece. But don't get too excited. This isn't a medieval banquet. There's no seasoning, no forks, no fire-roasted aroma. It's more practical murder, picnic. The kill is gutted with stone blades, some so dull they'd be better suited for butter. Organs are removed. The smell is indescribable, somewhere between open wound and what died in the sun for 3 days. You're handed a chunk of raw meat, not a cooked slice, not a cut of prime anything, just a chunk. You smile politely, like you've just been offered a plate of wasps, and try not to gag. One of the elders crouches over a fire pit, if you're lucky enough to be in a group that's mastered fire. If not, it's raw or lightly seared with embers and hopes. Now, about that fire, it's not a given. Fire doesn't just exist. It must be made by furiously rubbing sticks together or banging rocks until sparks fly. You try to help. You rub and rub and rub. After 10 minutes, you've created nothing but blisters and self-loathing. Meanwhile, the firemaker of the group lights a small blaze with practiced ease and looks at you like a kind but disappointed parent. You try to roast your meat. There are no skewers, no racks, no temperature control. You just sort of hold it close to the flame and hope it doesn't fall in or stay bloody. The outside chards, the inside remains suspiciously jiggly. You eat it anyway because you're starving, and also, technically speaking, still being judged. Congratulations, you've now consumed something that may or may not give you parasites. But hey, at least it's not poisonous roots or crunchy beetles. Speaking of which, tomorrow's breakfast might be both of those. Welcome to the cave, aka our new apartment with no rent, no privacy, and an exciting open-concept ventilation system called a hole in the ceiling. The interior design features natural limestone, decorative soot smears, and a charming ambiance of damp If you're expecting a welcome mat, or even a soft spot to sit, think again. Your seat is a rock. Your bed is a colder rock. Now don't just plop down anywhere. Cave society is surprisingly structured. The alpha, usually the strongest hunter or the one with the fewest visible injuries, claims the warmest, driest spot by the fire. His immediate circle fans out nearby. You're over by the wall with the half-burnt moss, the creepy skull, and a suspicious puddle that hisses when touched. The tribe's pecking order is established not by status updates, but by who gets the least mildew on their bedding. Contribute more. Bring meat, sharpen tools, entertain the children with aggressive stick waving, and you might graduate to mid-tier rock real estate. Refuse to adapt, you'll be sleeping with the bats, my friend. Let's talk cleanliness. Or rather, the lack thereof. In the prehistoric world, you are one giant, walking petri dish. Showers? No. Soap? Absolutely not. Toothbrushes? You have a stick and a dream. Your skin is coated in a fine layer of dirt, sweat, smoke, blood, some yours, some not, and possibly tree sap. Your hair looks like something a bird might move into. Your breath could kill small rodents, but no one notices, because everyone smells like a barbecue that got into a fight with a compost heap. Bathing, when it happens, is less a routine and more a ritual of desperation. Maybe you fall in a river. Maybe someone throws water at you during an argument. That's your bar. Your clothes, assuming you even have clothes, and not just fur draped over shame, are stiff, filthy, and crawling with friendly neighborhood lice. Itchy? Of course. But in prehistoric times, scratching is practically a hobby. Teeth, meanwhile, are not doing well. There's no floss, no dentist, and the diet is all bones and bark. You've already chipped something gnawing on fire-charred boar. Your molars are under siege. You're one gritty bite away from becoming the tribe's first gummy storyteller. And bathroom etiquette. Let's not. You go where the animals go, which is anywhere. No one warns you. No one cares. You might dig a hole out of politeness, but the truth is, nature is both your bathroom and your roommate. Let's dive into the next prehistoric joy, cave art, and early creativity. The first doodles in human history that basically said, we were here. Also, we saw a buffalo. After a long day of failing at hunting, chewing questionable meats, and acquiring 4 new insect bites and a sprained ego, you retreat to the cave hoping for sleep. But surprise, tonight's activity is culture. Welcome to the earliest form of human artistic expression, cave paintings. It's the Paleolithic version of Instagram, except there are no filters, no followers, and your audience is mostly future archaeologists who will squint at your stick figures and whisper, "We think this is a spiritual elk." You find yourself crouched in the dim glow of firelight, watching as the tribe's most artistically inclined member dips their hand in a mix of ground minerals, charcoal, spit, and what might be mammoth blood. They smear it lovingly across the cave wall, creating bold handprints, simple animals, and scenes of great hunts. Hunts that may or may not have gone how the pictures suggest. Prehistoric art, much like modern art, includes a healthy dose of creative license. That boar you helped hunt earlier. In the painting it looks like you tackled it bare-handed and screamed victory into the sky. Sure, let's go with that. You want to help, but no one hands you the paint. This is serious business. This is not the place for your modern doodles of cats or weird spirals. These drawings are part memory, part message, and part please don't forget we existed. Some historians believe these paintings were ritualistic, meant to summon success in the next hunt, or honor animal spirit. Others think they were educational tools for younger tribe members, or just people expressing themselves after a long, terrifying day of not being eaten. One thing's for sure, humans have always had an unstoppable urge to make stuff. Even when death is around every corner, we still sit down and draw buffalo. You try to join in and make a little stick figure version of yourself. Someone looks at it, then at you, and nods in a way that clearly means, don't quit your day job of not dying. Still, you feel oddly proud. You're part of something. You've added a smear of color to the wall of time. Your picture might be dust in 10,000 years, but for now, it says, I survived the day. Barely, but I did. Let's grunt, gesture, and fumble our way into the next part. Tribal communication and the birth of language, also known as how to scream at someone across the forest and not get eaten while doing it. At some point between throwing rocks and inventing pants, humans discovered a remarkable idea. Making sounds with their mouths actually helped them not die. This was groundbreaking. Before this, communication consisted of wild hand gestures, expressive eyebrow raises, and the occasional panic scream. But now we talk. Sort of. Early human language wasn't the melodic, flowery thing we know today. It was more like an intense game of charades. Except the stakes were life or death, and losing meant your tribe wandered off without you. Words began as sounds, simple ones. A grunt for danger, a hiss for snakes, a low whine for I'm hungry, and also possibly emotionally unstable. Over time, these sounds became more organized. Maybe ga meant fire, and oomph meant food. If you yelled ga oomph at someone, they understood it as don't eat that. It's still on fire. Language slowly formed out of necessity, Warnings, directions, questions like, "Where is the mammoth?" or more pressing ones like, "Did Grog seriously pee in the water again?" Of course, there were no grammar rules, no punctuation, just raw emotional sound effects, combined with frantic gesturing. You could convey everything from joy to existential despair by the tone of your grunt. If you were lucky, the other person understood you. If not, you might have accidentally proposed marriage to a tree stump. But even in this mess, something beautiful was happening. People were connecting, sharing stories, teaching their young not to poke bears or eat glowing mushrooms. Memory became something that could travel, passed from one mouth to another. Across generations, oral tradition was born, not with eloquence, but with conviction. You try to participate in a conversation. Someone points at a burnt tree, makes a whooshing noise, then holds up 5 fingers. You assume this means the fire was this big. You nod solemnly, then respond with a complicated series of gestures that accidentally insults his mother. He throws a stick at you. You're learning. Soon enough, there are group discussions around the fire, not philosophical debates, more like loud opinions on who let the fire go out again, or whether that distant howling is wolves, or the wind. It's wolves. Everyone talks at once. No one listens. It's basically a family dinner, but with more spear. And yet, this chaos is the foundation of everything. Language will evolve into song, poetry, diplomacy, and memes. But here in its crude, grunting infancy, it's saving lives. It's building bonds. It's the first true social network, with fewer hashtags and more accidental punches. So, you've managed to stay alive for another prehistoric sunrise. Congratulations. Unfortunately, the world outside is still a randomized chaos simulator, and today's challenge might be a lightning storm, a landslide, or being eaten headfirst by a creature with too many teeth and no concept of personal space. Let's start with the weather, which is less of a talking point and more of a constant existential threat. There's no weather app, no Doppler radar, just the sky suddenly turning black and everyone going, "Oh no, rain isn't just wet, it's a biblical deluge that soaks your only mammoth hide blanket and floods your camp." Lightning doesn't politely strike trees, it tries to smite your favorite cave. And if it's winter, good luck. You better hope you stored enough calories during the last warm season, because nature just flipped the difficulty setting to starve and shiver. And don't even think about asking what the temperature is. It's either cook your brain hot or snap your fingers off cold. There's no in between. You wake up with frost on your eyelashes, and by noon you're sunburned on your left ear. That's just how time works now. Now let's talk predators. You know that cozy, harmless feeling of walking through a modern forest? Yeah, forget every sound in the prehistoric world could be a predator. A snap of a twig means you might die. A rustle in the grass might be wind, might be a saber-toothed cat planning your funeral. And these aren't cartoon animals with names like Tony or Sid the Sloth. These are creatures with fangs the size of your hand and hunting instincts fine-tuned by millions of years of murder. There's the cave lion, larger than today's lions, and about as cuddly as a chainsaw. Giant hyenas that would eat your face after you were dead, just to be polite. Dire wolves, which are like wolves, but more direct. They hunt in packs. They're bigger than you want them to be, and they are very not vegan. Oh, and the bugs. You haven't even scratched the surface of bug life, though the bugs have definitely scratched you. Mosquitoes the size of wine corks, ticks that latch on like unpaid rent. And let's not forget prehistoric parasites that treat your intestines like a luxury Airbnb. But just when you think you've gotten the hang of survival, you've avoided predators. The sky hasn't exploded recently, and your hair hasn't frozen to your face. The earth itself betrays you. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, all on the table. Imagine standing on a hill, proudly chewing bark or whatever counts as lunch, when suddenly the entire mountain behind you explodes into fire and ash. Volcanic eruptions in prehistoric times were not subtle, they were cataclysmic. You don't run from them. You try to run, and then you get preserved in ash for 10,000 years, only to be rediscovered by modern humans and placed in a museum under the label "poor guy." Earthquakes, also terrifying. Your cave becomes a blender. The ground you trusted betrays you, and the river you just drank from changes course entirely. There's no FEMA, no emergency broadcast system. The best advice is stand next to something that won't fall on you and make peace with your life choices. And tsunamis, don't eat. The ocean is a beautiful death trap. One moment it's serene, the next it's a wall of water traveling faster than you can scream, bringing logs, fish and the crushed hopes of coastal dwellers everywhere. So when we say, you wouldn't last a day in prehistoric time, this is what we mean. The planet was a game of roulette, with storms, beasts and lava instead of numbers, and the house always wins. Let's now explore the terrifying, hilarious, and occasionally adorable reality of being a child in the prehistoric world. To be young in the prehistoric age. No homework, no screen time limits, no standardized testing, just the daily possibility of being kidnapped by a leopard. Welcome to childhood. 30,000 BC style. You're not so much raised as you are hardened by exposure. The concept of childhood as a time of carefree innocence doesn't quite exist yet. The tribe loves you, sure, but mostly in the please grow up quickly so you can help carry firewood and scream at predators kind of way. Your toys, rocks, sticks, maybe the occasional bone if you're lucky and the adults aren't using it for soup. You invent games that mostly involve chasing things or throwing things or pretending to kill things. An eerily accurate preview of your adult responsibilities. And if you're really creative, you and the other children draw on the walls of the cave, until one of the elders sees your doodle and mistakes it for a religious symbol. Congratulations, you just invented a cult. But don't be fooled by the giggles and pebble fights. Prehistoric childhood is serious business. By the time you're 5, you're already expected to carry small loads, gather firewood, and not die when your parents turn their backs. One moment you're learning how to make fire, and the next you're learning that fire is hot, using only your eyebrows as a cautionary tale. No strollers, no sippy cups, no safety gates, just sharp stones, open flames, and animals that would love to eat you if only you'd stop running in zigzags. Sickness? Let's talk about it. If you catch something, there's no doctor, only a shaman with a stick, some dried herbs, and the belief that evil spirits are inside your nose. Your treatment might involve smoke, chanting, or being gently smacked with a fern. And if you break a bone, well, hope you're left-handed now. Education happens through direct observation. You follow the grown-ups around, mimic what they do, and try to absorb wisdom like a tiny, barefoot intern. Sometimes someone teaches you directly, like don't poke that spider, but more often, you learn through a system called oh no, that hurt. And discipline? Forget timeouts. If you mess up, the entire tribe knows. There are no walls thin enough to contain prehistoric disappointment. Your punishment might be missing dinner, being told a scary story about a forest demon that eats naughty kids, or just being pointed at silently by a very tired woman who has birthed 6 children with no anesthesia. Yet somehow, there's joy, laughter, the unspoken bond of children racing through ferns, splashing in rivers, and daring each other to eat suspicious berries. For every danger, there's also curiosity. Every shadow becomes an adventure. Every day is a new story waiting to happen, as long as you survive it. So no, you wouldn't last a day as a prehistoric child. Your idea of hardship is slow Wi-Fi. These kids are out here dodging wolves and eating bugs for protein, and they are, without question, tougher than you. You're not feeling great. Maybe it's the weird tick bite on your leg. Maybe it's the fever. Maybe it's the fact that your appendix is preparing for a dramatic exit. But one thing's for sure, you're sick. And in the prehistoric world, that's a high-stakes gamble between miracle recovery and legendary funeral story. There are no doctors, no hospitals, no health insurance, unless you count the old lady who collects feathers and mumbles into boiling water as your in-network provider. Medicine, such as it is a chaotic blend of observation, experimentation, and spiritual improvisation. Let's start with what counts as medical training. Basically, if you've seen someone not die after chewing a plant, you assume that plant is good for something. Congratulations, you're now a healer. You've got a pouch full of herbs, a bird skull for credibility, and a solid 30% success rate. For pain, there's chewing willow bark. It's the prehistoric version of aspirin, but with more bark and less pharmaceutical testing. For wounds, slap on some moss, maybe sprinkle ash on it, whisper something vaguely encouraging, and hope it doesn't turn into a raging infection with its own personality. Speaking of infections, there's no germ theory. People don't know about bacteria. What they do know is that sometimes a wound smells bad, and that's probably a bad sign. so they try smoke, herbs, clay, or magical spitting. If you're lucky, the wound scabs over. If you're not, well, they name a hill after you. Surgeries were rare, terrifying, and sometimes disturbingly effective. Evidence from ancient skulls shows that people actually performed trepanation, the process of drilling a hole into your skull to release evil spirits or pressure. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just a sharp rock, and the unshakable confidence of someone who once saw a bird peck a turtle open and thought, "Hey, I could try that." And don't even ask about childbirth. That's an entire horror film in itself. There's no epidural, no clean linens, no OBGYN, just a very tired midwife, the village's only sharp flint knife, and a growing sense that women in prehistoric times were basically indestructible. In truth, a lot of healing came down to the body's own stubborn will to survive. The healer might wave smoke over your face, chant to the moon, rub animal fat on your ribs, or hang bones above your bed. But behind all of that was the unspoken knowledge. If you made it through the night, it wasn't because the gods smiled on you. It was because your immune system drop-kicked death in the face. Still, these early attempts were not without value. Over generations, patterns emerged. Some herbs did work, some wounds could heal, and the person in the tribe who remembered these details became invaluable. Not just a healer, but the memory keeper of survival. So no, you wouldn't last a day with a splinter in the prehistoric world. But if you did, you'd come out of it with a scar, a new respect for bark tea, and possibly the nickname One-Eyed Carl. Imagine it's midnight in your cave. The wind outside sounds like it's whispering secrets. The fire crackles. Shadows on the wall stretch and twist into something almost human. But not quite. Someone in the back starts humming. And suddenly, you realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're wondering, why does the sun come back every morning? Where does Uncle Gruck go after he dies? Why did that big hunt succeed when the last one ended with 4 sprained ankles and a very smug bison? Welcome to Spirituality, Prehistoric Edition. Less about organized religion, more about organized confusion, mixed with a healthy fear of lightning. You don't have priests or prophets. What you do have is the elder who always seems to be talking to the sky. The woman who dreams about mammoths and then actually finds one the next day. And that guy who hasn't blinked in 2 hours, but really feels like he's connected to something bigger. Your gods? They're probably animal-shaped. Maybe the bear is your ancestor. Maybe the eagle is a messenger. Maybe that snake you saw slithering out of the river is a water spirit. Or maybe it just wanted a bath. It's hard to tell, but you're not going to risk offending it. Spiritual rituals are intense. There's dancing, drumming, chanting, shaking bones, tossing herbs into the fire, and wearing masks carved from wood and antlers. Because nothing says please don't smite us like turning your face into a deer's. It's part performance, part prayer, and part stress relief after a week of being chased by carnivores. And when things go wrong, say there's a drought or a sickness or the stars look a bit too twitchy, you don't ask what happened. You ask who you offended. Was it the sky spirit, the river ghost, that weird tree you cut down even though it creaked at you? Appeasement becomes an art form. You leave offerings, berries, feathers, carved stones, the good chunk of meat you were saving for later, sacrifices, prayers, elaborate dances around campfires, anything to shift your luck back into the green zone. Death, too, becomes spiritual. The dead aren't just gone. They've gone somewhere, and if you don't bury them right or honor them properly, they might come back with opinion. So graves are prepared with care. Tools for the journey, beads, maybe some ochre paint, and a whispered farewell. The cave becomes a sacred space. The bones, a reminder. The silence, it listens. Cave paintings may have been part of this too. They weren't just artistic selfies. They may have been spells, prayers, or visual communions with something beyond. A bison drawn in ochre and charcoal wasn't just decoration, it was invitation, or maybe warning. Come back, food spirit, or don't come back, angry spirit. Hard to say. So no, you wouldn't last a day during a prehistoric ritual. Not without asking, wait, why are we all naked and covered in mud? But these rituals gave life meaning. They created community. They offered hope when hope was hard to come by. And if nothing else, They gave you a reason to dance like no editor was watching. Now let's crawl into the world's first art studio, a chilly cave in southern France, lit only by flickering firelight and an overwhelming sense of this wall needs something. There are no art schools, no sketchbooks, and definitely no paint by numbers. And yet, someone picks up a chunk of charcoal and draws a horse, not a perfect horse, but one that moves, gallops, and lives on the wall. The first animation. These paintings are bold. Animals leap across stone in red ochre, black manganese, and soft yellows. Some are so detailed they show motion, herds in migration, bison mid-charge. Others are abstract symbols, dots, spirals, handprints blown onto the walls in dusty silhouettes, like prehistoric graffiti. Groke was here. Why did they paint? Maybe to tell stories, maybe to pass down knowledge, maybe to impress someone cute. Or maybe it was spiritual. A way to honor the hunt, speak to the spirit world, or visualize success before chasing a creature 3 times your size and 4 times your mood. But it wasn't just painting. Carvings appear on bones, antlers, ivory, little statues, like the famous Venus figurines, celebrate fertility, form, and the truly stunning size of early human hips. Music, too, left traces behind. Flutes made from bird bones, rhythms tapped out with stones. The world's first concerts, attended by owls. Art wasn't extra, it was essential. It gave shape to fear, celebration, memory. It taught, healed, warned, and worshipped. Even when the saber-toothed cat population was booming, and food was basically just running in the opposite direction, humans still made time to create. So no, you wouldn't last a day as a prehistoric artist. You'd run out of breath, blowing pigment through a reed, and immediately choke on a bug. But you'd admire the firelit genius of your ancestors. They weren't just surviving, they were making something worth surviving for. Now we enter the dark. Not metaphorically, literally. You've wandered into the forest at night. There are sounds you don't recognize. The wind is howling, and somewhere, a branch just snapped without your permission. You're terrified. So what do? You invent reasons. Early myths were born from fear, wonder, and the raw need to explain a world full of sharp edges. Lighting wasn't just electricity. It was a sky beast throwing fire. The eclipse, a cosmic animal swallowing the sun. The forest, alive, watching, hungry. These weren't bedtime stories, they were survival manuals, dressed up in drama. Don't wander too far, or the forest spirit will snatch you. Don't fish on a full moon, or the river god will drown you. Don't laugh at the thunder, or it'll strike your favorite goat. And then there were the monsters. Some myths may have been inspired by real creatures, bears that stood upright, wolves with glowing eyes, snakes that moved in ways that felt like spells, but others were purely imagination-fueled fever dreams. Giant birds that snatched children, spirits that lived in caves and spoke through echoes, shadow things that only came for liars and people who skipped their firewood duties. These monsters served a purpose. They explained the unexplained, enforced rules, gave people a way to express emotions too big for everyday language. Grief became a ghost. Guilt became a shapeshifter. Natural disaster became a god with bad moods and worse timing. You might think it sounds primitive, but the truth is, we still do this. We turn fears into stories. We name the unknown, and we whisper to the dark, just in case it's listening. So no, you wouldn't last a day with prehistoric myths. You'd hear one old story about a spirit that eats people who whistle after sunset, and you'd spend the next 6 months silently panicking every time you exhale too loudly. But you'd also understand that stories weren't just entertainment. They were anchors, reminders that even in a world full of danger, humans could imagine their way into safety, community, and courage. So after this little prehistoric tour, let's be honest with ourselves. You wouldn't last a day. You wouldn't even last an hour. You'd wake up, realize your breakfast is a half-rotten root, your toilet is a bush, and your Wi-Fi is a rock with a lizard on it, and you'd simply lie back down and let natural selection do its thing. Your feet would be blistered, your stomach would be confused, your skin would be mosquito property. You'd be sunburned, smoke-scented, mildly concussed from a falling branch, and deeply traumatized by the fact that everything wants to kill you, including the weather. You'd try to start a fire, and end up inventing a minor forest catastrophe. You'd mistake a deadly mushroom for a healthy snack. You'd sneeze once and become a walking offering to the spirit of seasonal allergies. But here's the thing. The people back then did less a day, and another, and another. They survived, adapted, thrived. They tamed fire, shaped stone, painted on walls, buried their dead with love, stared up at the stars, and whispered stories to each other in the dark. And they did it all without Google, shoes, or a single scented candle. Their lives were brutal, but they weren't meaningless. They had community, belief, awe. They feared the world, but they also honored it. They didn't conquer nature, they danced with it, dodged it, occasionally got eaten by it, but always respected it. And weirdly, despite the danger and disease and dietary horrors, there's something kind of admirable about it. Something human, something eternal. We're not so different, really. We still ask big questions. We still tell stories around glowing lights. We still leave offerings, not to forest spirits, but to vending machines that ate our dollar. We still fear the dark, and we still try to make meaning out of chaos. The tools have changed. The instinct hasn't. So maybe you wouldn't survive a prehistoric day, but the echoes of those who did still live in your bones, in your imagination, in your weird urge to tell ghost stories when the power goes out. And hey, at least your breakfast won't stare back. Let's step into the smoky, flickering, often explosive history of how humans clawed their way out of the dark. The Dark Ages, literally, before there was light, there was darkness. Literal, choking, all-consuming darkness, and humans didn't like it one bit. Imagine being a prehistoric human. The sun sets, and just like that, your entire world disappears. No backup flashlight, no phone screen, not even the comforting blue glow of a fridge light when you open it to stare blankly inside at 2 a.m. Nope, just blackness. You hear rustling. Something howls. You clutch a rock like it's going to save you. Welcome to every single night for tens of thousands of years. So what did our ancestors do? They discovered fire. By accident, of course. Probably by watching lightning strike a tree and going, "Oh, so that's what we've been doing wrong." And so begins humanity's long, dysfunctional relationship with light. It burns, it smokes, it occasionally kills you. But boy, does it look pretty at night. Early fire was a game changer. Not only did it light up the night, it also let humans cook food, scare off predators, and dramatically warm their feet while staring into the flames like angsty poets. But fire came with some tiny little drawbacks. It could, and did, burn down every dwelling made of straw, wood, or whatever we could pile into a hut and call architecture. If you fell asleep next to the fire, you either woke up shivering because it burned out, or you didn't wake up at all. Still, fire was the thing. For thousands of years, humanity would gather around it, roast questionable meat, tell stories about sky gods, and try to ignore the smoke making their eyes sting like betrayal. Then came oil lamps. Basically, ancient people realized, hey, what if we trapped fire in a bowl and fed it some goo? These bowls of goo were revolutionary. You could carry them around, you could hang them from the ceiling, you could almost see what you were doing. The only catch, that goo was often whale oil. Yes, entire oceans of majestic creatures were hunted just so someone could squint at a dinner plate after sundown. Whale oil didn't smell great, either. Imagine lighting your room with a melting candle made of fish farts. That's the vibe. But hey, progress. Some used olive oil, classy, while others used animal fat, less classy, but efficient. Either way, these lamps made things brighter, and a little greasier. Candles were a huge step forward. Fire in a bowl was great and all, but what if you wanted portable light? Something that wouldn't slosh hot whale juice all over your lap every time you moved. The candle was the answer. A solid stick of burnable stuff with a string through it. Simple, elegant, and wildly impractical in wind. But not all candles were created equal. If you were rich, you used beeswax candles, clean burning, sweet smelling, and utterly luxurious. If you were poor, you used tallow candles, made from rendered beef fat. Yes, you were literally lighting your room with cow grease, and they smelled exactly like you'd expect. Imagine sitting down to read by candlelight and being hit in the face with the scent of an abandoned stew. To make it worse, tallow candles had a nasty habit of melting unevenly, dripping hot fat onto furniture, or just collapsing into puddles of sadness. And the wicks? They smoked like they were trying to summon the spirit of lung disease. You didn't read by candlelight so much as squint through a fog of burning meat fumes. But despite their flaws, candles were treasured. In medieval times, people would literally save candle stubs and remelt them into Frankenstein light hybrids. And heaven forbid someone knocked one over, your entire house, made of timber and dreams, could vanish in under 5 minutes. Lighting a room with candles was also not cheap. The average household couldn't just burn them casually. You lit one, very carefully, did what you needed to do with extreme urgency, and blew it out like it was costing you a week's wages. Because it probably was. Still, it was better than nothing, or at least better than tripping over your chamber pot in the dark and wondering why your toes are wet. Torches were another popular choice. Big stick, wrapped in flammable cloth, soaked in pitch or animal fat, and set on fire. You'd think it was an ancient method reserved for dramatic castle raids and Frankenstein mobs. But no, they were actually used to light homes, paths, and streets. But torches were the equivalent of walking around with a Molotov cocktail. They dripped flaming gunk, they spit spark, and they smoked so much that carrying one indoors was basically how you invented accidental arson. Still, if you needed to stumble through the woods at night, a torch was your best bet, assuming you didn't mind being visible to every predator in a 5-mile radius and accidentally burning off your eyebrows. The Renaissance, when people started thinking, what if light, but better? By the Renaissance, clever people began experimenting with lamps that didn't want to kill you. They used glass chimneys to control the flame. They added little fuel reservoirs. Things got a tiny bit less flammable and a tiny bit more expensive. But at this point, most people still just accepted that nighttime was a kind of trial by darkness. You'd finish your day before sunset. You'd eat dinner squinting into your bowl. You'd go to bed early, not because you were healthy and disciplined, but because there was literally nothing else to do. Because reading, that required good light. And good light meant money. If you were poor and wanted to read after dark, you either had to sit next to the one candle your family owned, or become a monk, which was pretty much the same thing, but with more Latin. Now prepare to step into the 19th century, when cities first lit up like Christmas trees, and then occasionally blew up like fireworks shows gone horribly wrong. It's time to explore. The industrial age brought many wonders. Steam power, locomotives, mustaches you could lose a fork in, and gas lighting. For the first time in human history, streets, homes, and theatres were bathed in a bright, flickering glow that didn't require cow fat or whale murder. It was revolutionary. It was beautiful. It was also a bit of a death trap. Here's how it worked. You pumped coal gas, a flammable, explosive substance through pipes into homes and buildings, then released it into special lamps where it would catch fire on purpose. Basically, people were now lighting their houses by inviting flammable gas into every room and hoping for the best. Yes, it lit the way. Yes, it was glorious. But it also leaked filled rooms with carbon monoxide, and occasionally went boom. Gas explosion became a regular headline. And if you passed out in your parlour from the fumes, well, at least you died in a nicely lit room. Even worse, the phrase being gaslit originally referred to this setup, because the lights would literally flicker when someone else in the building adjusted the flow of gas. So if you were sitting alone and saw the lights dim, you'd wonder, did someone just turn the gas up? Or more likely, am I losing my mind? So in a way, gaslighting really did make people question their reality. But despite the risk of spontaneous combustion, gaslighting was a huge cultural leap. Suddenly, people could go out at night, theatres were brighter, streets became less terrifying, and Victorian social life exploded, again sometimes literally. But gas had its limits. It was expensive, it stank, it made everything soot-covered, and it turned homes into ticking time bombs with wallpaper. So naturally, inventors everywhere, asked the next big question. What if we could make light with electricity? Enter the electrical era. Suddenly, the world was buzzing. Literally, with a new form of energy that promised clean, bright, explosion-free illumination. The race to invent the light bulb was chaotic. To put it mildly, think Shark Tank, but with more electrocuted pigeons and bitter patent lawsuits. You've probably heard of Thomas Edison, who marketed himself as the great light bulb genius. He absolutely did not invent the light bulb, but what he did do was build a version that was practical, commercialized, and aggressively patented. Before Edison, other inventors like Humphrey Davy, Warren de la Rue, and Joseph Swan had created various versions of glowing filaments. Some worked, but only briefly. Others were so expensive that you could buy a small farm instead. Edison's key breakthrough, a carbonized bamboo filament that lasted for over 1,000 hours. Affordable, efficient, and less prone to catching your curtains on fire. This made it ideal for home use. Assuming you had access to electricity, which at the time was mostly reserved for rich folks and suspiciously glowing laboratories. But Edison had competition. Nikola Tesla, the wizard of alternating current, AC, challenged Edison's direct current, DC empire. Edison ran smear campaigns claiming Tesla's current would fry elephants. Tesla responded by ignoring him and inventing, well, basically the modern world. But while the two bickered about voltage, the humble light bulb started appearing everywhere. Cities glowed, factories ran 24/7, and people could finally read in bed without setting their sheets on fire. A miracle? Yes. Completely safe? Hey. Early wiring had a tendency to catch fire or electrocute people who just wanted to turn on a lamp. But hey, progress. Fast forward to today, and lighting has evolved into something completely new. Incandescent bulbs, warm and comforting, but energy hogs, fluorescents, bright, buzzing and designed to make every office feel like a dentist's waiting room. Compact fluorescents, CFLs, those curly ones that take 5 minutes to warm up and make you question your life choices. LEDs, the superheroes of modern lighting, efficient, cool, and capable of mimicking everything from sunlight to alien spaceship glow. Now, we can light our homes with the touch of a button, or with our voices, or through an app. Want your living room to glow fuchsia at 3 a.m? Go for it. Want your bedside lamp to simulate a sunrise? Done. Want to ruin your circadian rhythm with blue light at midnight while doom scrolling? That's not just possible, it's the default. We've come a long way, from huddling around fire in fear, to choosing whether your bathroom glows in warm white or daylight neutral. Light has become part of how we express ourselves, work, play, and live. So what have we learned? Lighting has always been a story of trial and error, mostly error. Sometimes the error was, let's fill the living room with gas and see what happens. Sometimes it was, let's hang a burning stick above a thatched roof. But through scorched fingers, singed eyebrows, and a lot of smoky trial runs, humanity chased the light and finally caught it. Now we can read, after dark, work around the clock, illuminate cities from space, all without needing a cow, a whale, or a fire pit in the middle of the kitchen. And the best part, your living room no longer smells like sizzling beef every time you turn on the lights. How toilets took over the world, a history of human dignity and disaster. Let's not lie to ourselves. Civilizations rise and fall, but there's one thing that unites all of humanity, one daily ritual that every emperor, peasant, inventor, and celebrity has in common. The toilet, yes, the humble porcelain throne. You sit on it. You ignore it. You pretend it isn't one of the most important inventions in human history. But let's be honest. Take it away, and civilization collapses in a very smelly heap. Imagine your life without it. No clean bathrooms, no quiet scrolling breaks, No awkward eye contact in public restrooms. Just you, nature, and the sudden realization that leaves are not built for this. This is the story of how humanity clawed its way out of the literal muck, one awkward innovation, one heroic flush at a time. It's a tale of dignity, disaster, and one Victorian man named Thomas Crapper, who changed the world with a name no child can hear without snickering. So grab a seat, preferably with a lid, and let's flush our way through history. Because if there's one thing history really teaches us, it's that people have always been figuring out how to go with style, long before plumbing, before architecture, before agriculture, even before someone figured out you could cook a chicken instead of gnawing it raw. There was the original bathroom. Anywhere. If you're picturing majestic woolly mammoths roaming the Ice Age and early humans contemplating the stars, don't forget that those same humans were also crouching behind rocks and hoping the wind didn't blow the wrong way. Because when nature calls and you don't have walls, it's a roll of the dice every time. There was no concept of privacy, no doors, no stalls, and certainly no spray to leave it better than you found it. Just wide open spaces, communal defecation zones, and the vague hope that a predator didn't take your squat as a sign of weakness. And let's talk toilet paper, or rather the lack of it. Prehistoric humans had to get creative: leaves, moss, sticks, smooth stones, and if things got truly desperate, their own hands. Yes, really, somewhere out there, a caveman probably discovered poison ivy the hard way. Anthropologists believe that even early Homo sapiens developed habits of relieving themselves far from their homes and sleeping areas, likely as a survival instinct. No one wanted to lie down next to last night's business, so your morning walk was not for exercise. It was tactical bowel distancing. We know from archaeological evidence that early human campsites sometimes had latrine zones, a polite way of saying, yeah, we all go behind that rock. Congratulations, humanity. That's the first restroom sign. But here's the truly wild part. This crude form of public sanitation may have been the spark of civilization itself, working together to avoid one another's waste. That's cooperation, that's community, that's culture. So yes, the very first societies may have formed not because of art, or love, or survival, but because nobody wanted to step in anyone else's crap. Now we dive into the age when humanity finally got tired of pooping behind bushes and decided to get civilized about it. Civilization, the wheel, the plow, written language, and plumbing. As soon as humans figured out how to stack rocks into houses, someone immediately asked, okay, but where do we go when we really need to go? And that question echoed across ancient lands, giving birth to toilets that were, brace yourself, shockingly impressive. Let's start with the Indus Valley civilization, circa 2600 BC. These people weren't messing around. They had multi-room homes with private bathrooms, and not just a hole in the floor, a drainage system that led out to covered sewer channels. In other words, their streets had better plumbing than a suspicious number of modern apartment buildings. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the people of Uruk and Babylon used ceramic pipes, stone drainage systems, and toilets flushed with buckets of water. It was DIY plumbing, sure, but they made it work. Honestly, they deserve more respect for juggling astronomy, legal codes, and public sanitation all at once. But it's the ancient Romans who truly elevated the toilet from a necessity to a communal bonding experience. Enter the latrine, long benches with evenly spaced holes, where dozens of Romans could sit together and chat while doing their business. Think of it as a coffee shop, except with more togas and less espresso. And if you're wondering about privacy, there wasn't any. The Roman bathroom was less personal time and more team meeting. Need to discuss politics or gossip about your neighbor, just do it while maintaining direct eye contact across the communal loop. Their toilets even had flowing water beneath the seats to wash away waste. Primitive but effective. And instead of toilet paper, a shared sponge on a stick, kept in salt water between uses. Yes, shared. Sponge. On a stick. We don't know if it had a name, but I'd like to imagine it was something grand and Latin. Perhaps Spongia maxima, bringer of hygiene and hepatitis. The Romans also had public bathhouses connected to their sanitation systems, and an entire class of workers called foricari was responsible for cleaning the sewer systems. These brave souls dealt with the literal underbelly of Rome, and almost certainly did not get invited to dinner parties. So while the modern world likes to think of toilets as a symbol of luxury, Ancient civilizations were already showing us the way. If you don't manage your waste, it'll manage you. They paved the way for the clean, private-centered bathroom future we know today, and they did it all while having heart-to-hearts on a marble bench with their tunics around their ankles. If the Roman Empire gave us flowing water and sponge-based socialism, the Middle Ages took one look at that progress and said, what if we did none of that? When the empire fell, so too did the dream of civilized sanitation. The aqueducts crumbled, the sewers clogged, and suddenly people were back to doing their business wherever the mood or emergency struck. It was 1,000 years of vibes only, and those vibes smelled like regret. Let's start with chamber pots, the medieval solution to indoor plumbing. These were small bowls you kept under your bed, designed for those late-night moments when you didn't feel like walking to the communal latrine or leaning off the side of a castle. In theory, you'd empty them properly in the morning. In practice, not so much. People would chuck the contents out the window with a cheerful "garde l'eau," meaning watch out for the water in French, which was your 1-second warning before a surprise airborne bowel movement landed in the street below. The phrase eventually evolved into the English word loo, which is a hilariously polite term considering its origins involve aerial poop attacks. And if you think that's bad, let's talk castle toilets, also known as garderobes. These were literal holes in the stone walls, with a chute that led straight down to the outside moat, or worse, a pile of human suffering below. Some even hung directly over rivers, making every bathroom trip an existential crisis. One slip, and suddenly you weren't using the toilet, you were the toilet. Worse still, medieval towns, narrow streets, open gutters, and no trash collection meant everything ended up in the road. Animal waste, human waste, and sometimes dead animals themselves. It was less cobblestone charm, and more smells like the devil's armpit. Shoes were less fashion statement, more survival gear. You didn't wear them to look good. You wore them to not drown in yesterday's stew of horrors. The rich fared only slightly better. Nobles had fancier chamber pots, sometimes made of brass or even silver, but no matter how shiny the pot, the contents were still deeply uncivilized. And yes, there were people whose actual job was to carry out these pots and dump them. These unsung heroes were known as gong farmers. Glamorous, right? Bathing was also rare. Some people believed water could carry disease through the skin, which to be fair wasn't entirely wrong when you bathe in a shared tub once a month. Smell was simply part of your personality. You didn't eliminate body odor, you just tried to out-perfume it. This was the age of castles and knights, of legends and lore, and also of people peeing into buckets next to the dinner table. Hygiene wasn't just bad, it was practically optional. So if you time traveled to the medieval period and wanted to blend in, just follow 3 rules. 1. Don't question the smell. 2. Duck when someone yells "garde l'eau." 3. And never ever look directly into the moat. Gladly, we've survived the medieval muck, barely. Now let's strut our way into the Renaissance, where everything got fancier, except the plumbing. The Renaissance, an age of rebirth, art, science, and incredible hats. People were painting the Sistine Chapel, discovering new continents, and writing sonnets that could melt your heart, and yet they were still pooping in pots. You'd think the rediscovery of Greek and Roman knowledge would have led to a return of decent sanitation. After all, the ancients had working sewers and bathhouses. But no, humanity looked at all that brilliant infrastructure and said, let's stick with buckets and hope for the best. Palaces and manor houses still used chamber pots, only now they were ornate, gilded, painted, engraved. Some even had little poems or portraits at the bottom, because nothing says class like staring into a porcelain portrait of your least favorite noble while relieving yourself. Public streets remained cesspool adjacent. Cities like Paris and London were architectural masterpieces on the outside, but biological war zones at street level. Sidewalks, optional. Sewer systems, laughable. Smell, inevitable. And if you were wondering whether people still threw waste out of windows, oh yes, they did. In fact, some cities tried to pass laws requiring folks to only dump their chamber pots at specific times. Imagine a town crier yelling, 10 o'clock and all's well. Feel free to launch your filth. Now there were some innovations. The Renaissance gave rise to the close stool, a sort of early portable toilet chair. It looked like an elegant piece of furniture, complete with cushions and privacy curtains. But open the lid, and surprise, it's still just a bucket underneath. You've essentially turned a poop bucket into a throne, which is either a clever disguise or a metaphor for most political systems. The close stool was often attended by personal servants. Yes, wealthy nobles had people whose actual job was to be near them during business meetings. These assistants were called grooms of the stool, and this wasn't a joke. It was an incredibly powerful position in court. Why? Because if you're the one holding the royal chamber pot, you also hear all the royal secrets. Literal power behind the throne. Bathing made a mild comeback, especially among the upper classes, but soap was still expensive, hot water was a luxury, and many folks believed perfume could do all the heavy lifting. Spoiler, it couldn't. The fashion of the time included huge collars and layers of velvet and wool, which, when worn for weeks without washing, became walking petri dishes of ambition and aroma. So while the Renaissance painted a glorious picture of human potential, underneath all those ruffles and Renaissance flair, people were still wrestling with the same old problem. Where to go, and how not to step in it. Let's light a candle, pull up our britches, and stroll into the Enlightenment. The era where reason triumphed, wigs got taller, and finally, someone started taking the bathroom seriously. By the 17th and 18th centuries, people were tired of throwing waste out the window, and pretending their wigs made up for the smell. The Age of Enlightenment was all about rationality, progress, and asking bold questions like, what if we didn't live in human filth anymore? The good news, thinkers and inventors started tackling the toilet problem. The bad news, it was still a long, leaky road to modern plumbing. Let's start with the privy, which was basically a small wooden shack with a hole in the ground, set far from the house. Romantic, right? These were fine, until it rained and the whole thing turned into a splash zone of despair. In the cities, things were worse. Tenement houses often shared one outhouse between dozens of people, and emptying it was, well, someone else's problem. Usually the sewer workers, who were paid in pain and trauma. But something magical was stirring beneath the powdered wigs and waistcoats. The flush toilet. Enter Sir John Harington, godson of Queen Elizabeth I, in 1596. Yes, we're rewinding a little. Harington designed a flushing toilet with a water tank and valve system. He even installed one for the Queen. But the idea didn't catch on. Maybe because plumbing was expensive, or maybe because nobody wanted to take toilet advice from a guy who once published an epic poem about himself on the toilet. 2 centuries later, the idea came back, with a vengeance. And here's where it gets glorious. Meet Thomas Crapper, the most unfortunately named but wonderfully useful man in toilet history. No, he didn't invent the flush toilet, but he did perfect it, popularize it, and make it something the middle class could aspire to own. He opened a plumbing showroom in London, with working models that people could try. Yes, the Victorian public could walk in, lift a lever, and marvel as water whooshed away their imaginary waste. Crapper also held several patents, including one for the ballcock, which sounds like a medieval insult, but is actually a valve that controls water flow in a toilet tank. It's still used today. His name, by sheer cosmic comedy, would eventually become synonymous with using the bathroom. Crapper, crapping, all official tributes to a man who simply wanted cleaner flushes. Meanwhile, the sewer systems of London and Paris were finally getting upgrades, thanks in part to cholera outbreaks that made it very clear dumping waste into your water supply is a bad idea. Revolutionary stuff. The Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames River basically turned into a flowing biohazard, was so awful that Parliament had to flee their own chambers due to the smell. This triggered the construction of a modern sewer system, because apparently nothing motivates politicians like having to breathe what the public lives in. Toilets became porcelain. Indoor plumbing became fashionable, and having your own private bathroom started to symbolize not just wealth, but dignity. You could now read a book, have a thought, or just sit in silence while your waste vanished somewhere else. Truly, the dream of the Enlightenment gave us Newton, Voltaire, the American Revolution, and toilets that no longer involved shouting warnings out the window. Civilization was finally rising above the bucket. But the journey wasn't over yet, because next came the modern era, and with it, plastic toilet seats, space toilets, and the psychological drama of public restrooms. Let's now enter the age of convenience, consumerism, and chronic oversharing. The modern era, where the bathroom becomes not just a necessity, but a lifestyle. By the 20th century, Humanity had finally achieved what our ancestors could only dream of: the ability to relieve ourselves indoors without having to fear rats, cold breezes, or the judgmental glare of a passing cow. Indoor plumbing became the global gold standard. Your grandparents might have grown up with an outhouse, but by the time disco rolled around, most people were flush with ceramic luxury. The bathroom was now a private sanctuary, a place to sing, think, hide from your kids, or scroll through your phone until your legs went numb. But let's be honest, toilets evolved in some weird directions. Take Japan, for example. The Japanese toilet is not a toilet. It's a space-age command center. Heated seats, built-in bidets, buttons you don't understand but push anyway. Some even play music to mask your activities, because nothing screams dignity like an artificial waterfall sound. Meanwhile, in the West, toilets stayed simpler: flush, lever, tank, seat. But we began making them out of everything from plastic to gold, because if there's one thing humans love, it's turning a necessity into a design statement. You can now buy toilets that light up, talk to you, and even analyze your health. Your medieval ancestors would have thought you were possessed by demons. Public restrooms, on the other hand, became battlegrounds. The doors never quite close, the locks are flimsy, and the floor is always mysteriously wet. You walk in like it's a hostage negotiation, touching nothing, breathing as little as possible, and praying the toilet paper roll isn't just an empty cardboard tube, mocking your optimism. And let's not forget the great philosophical divide: toilet paper versus bidet. Americans clutch their rolls like national treasures, while the rest of the world asks, "You wipe with what?" and then just stand up. This is one of the great cultural gulfs, along with metric versus imperial, and whether you put ketchup on eggs. Then there are eco-toilets, designed to save water and compost waste. These are brilliant ideas that feel slightly too close to medieval methods for most people's comfort. It's hard to feel enlightened when you're stirring your own contributions with a biodegradable stick. And finally, there's the rise of the toilet selfie. Yes, in our digital age, people take pictures in bathrooms, fancy mirrors, perfect lighting. It's where vanity meets velocity. You're posting to Instagram from the very place where 17th century nobles once hoped the pot didn't tip over. We've come so far. And yet. So here we are, the modern throne, available in every home, office, airport, and gas station. A porcelain symbol of human progress, of engineering, sanitation, and the triumph of comfort over chaos. We no longer need to squat over a hole, light incense to mask the horror, or hire a man in tights to carry our poop outside. We've made it. Sort of. Because no matter how fancy the toilet gets, no matter how ergonomic the seat or hands-free the flush, we're still just highly evolved primates, looking for a clean place to go. The history of toilets isn't just about plumbing, it's about dignity, innovation, and the tireless human quest not to step in our own mistakes. We've gone from Roman sewer gods to Renaissance bucket thrones, from medieval streets of stench to toilet tech worthy of NASA. So next time you sit down on your ceramic chair of power, give a little nod to the past, to the Romans with their sponge sticks, to the grooms of the stool who took one for the team, to Thomas Crapper, who made flushing fashionable, and to every anonymous soul who asked, what if we didn't throw it out the window this time? Because history isn't always written in ink. Sometimes it's flushed. It starts innocently enough. A cup, a sip, a jolt. You feel smarter, more awake, ready to overthrow a monarchy maybe, or at least read the news without falling asleep. What if I told you this innocent little brew, beloved fuel of college students, philosophers, and overworked baristas, once terrified kings, toppled empires, and sparked revolutions? Welcome to the story of how a bitter bean became the world's most powerful beverage. Coffee didn't just wake up the world, it changed it. Like all great stories in history, this one begins with a goat doing something it really shouldn't. Legend says it happened in the Ethiopian highlands. A goatherd named Kaldi noticed his goats dancing, literally bouncing around like they'd discovered goat jazz. The cause? Some shiny red berries they'd nibbled off a bush. Naturally, Kaldi tried some himself. The next thing we know, he's on a full caffeine high, scribbling philosophy, or whatever the 9th century version of slam poetry was. The story may be more myth than fact, but one thing's certain: coffee originated in Ethiopia, then spread across the Arabian Peninsula faster than a barista on a double shift. By the 15th century, it was being cultivated and brewed in Yemen, where Sufi mystics used it to stay awake during long nights of chanting, praying, and possibly worrying about goats with too much energy. It wasn't just a drink, it was divine fuel. They called it kowa, which originally meant wine, because frankly, when alcohol is forbidden, a really strong cup of coffee starts to feel pretty sacred. By the 16th century, coffee had jumped from Yemen to the Ottoman Empire, basically the caffeine capital of the world at the time. Istanbul's streets buzzed with the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and coffee houses popped up everywhere, quickly becoming the hottest social spots outside the palace. Imagine this: you walk into a dimly lit room filled with smoke, because tobacco and coffee were a perfect combo. Wooden tables carved with deep conversation grooves, and a crowd eagerly debating everything from poetry to politics. It was a place where the Sultan's word was challenged, not with swords, but with words, fueled by endless cups of dark, bitter brew. But not everyone loved these caffeinated debates. The Ottoman authorities got suspicious. Coffee houses were nicknamed schools of the wise and penny universities, because for the price of a cup, anyone could attend fiery discussions that might just start a revolution. In fact, coffee was so powerful it was banned several times, accused of stirring unrest and encouraging people to think independently. The Sultan even threatened to shut down the cafes, because apparently too much thinking is dangerous. Who knew? Yet the coffee houses thrived, becoming a hub for poets, intellectuals, and rebels alike. If you wanted to hear the latest news, plot political moves, or simply impress your friends by quoting Rumi while sipping Turkish coffee with a side of rosewater biscuit, this was the place to be. So, coffee wasn't just a drink. It was a social movement, one that quietly brewed seeds of change across an empire. By the 17th century, the tantalizing aroma of coffee had wafted into Europe, arriving via Venice and other Mediterranean ports. At first, it was the exotic beverage of the elite, merchants, nobles, and curious aristocrats eager to sip the mysterious dark liquid everyone was buzzing about. But coffee wasn't just a fancy drink. It became the life of the party, or more accurately, the life of the salon. You see, Europe had its taverns and alehouses, but coffee houses introduced a new vibe: clear-headed conversations fueled by caffeine rather than poos. Here, people gathered not to get drunk, but to get ideas. Writers, scientists, philosophers, and political thinkers met over steaming cups to discuss everything from Newton's laws to the latest scandal in the royal court. These coffee houses earned nicknames like penny universities, because for the price of a cup, you could attend discussions that would otherwise cost a fortune in formal education. Basically, coffee made knowledge democratic. Well, if you could afford the drink. But coffee also caused quite a stir. The new beverage was dubbed the bitter invention of Satan by some clerics who were suspicious of its foreign origins and stimulant effects. Pope Clement VIII was said to have tasted it, and reportedly gave it his blessing, declaring it so delicious it would be a sin to ban it. Thanks, Pope. These European coffee houses became hotspots for revolutionary ideas. Literally, the future leaders of the French Revolution, for instance, debated liberty and equality over countless cups of café au lait. Benjamin Franklin allegedly praised coffee's ability to keep minds sharp. Voltaire was famously known to drink up to 50 cups a day. No wonder his writings are spirited. Coffee helped fuel the Enlightenment, that brilliant age when reason and science shook the foundations of monarchy and superstition. So next time you sip your morning brew, remember, you might just be partaking in a centuries-old tradition of caffeinated rebellion. By the 18th century, coffee had made its way across the Atlantic to the American colonies, just in time for a revolution. But don't picture angry mobs armed with muskets and muskola. These patriots preferred their weapons of choice, steaming mugs of coffee and sharp tongues. Back then, tea was the king of beverages in the colonies, until the infamous Boston Tea Party of 1773, when colonists dumped a whole shipment of British tea into Boston Harbor to protest taxation without representation. It wasn't just a political statement, it was a cultural shift. Suddenly, coffee became the rebellious alternative, the drink of patriots who refused to be taxed by a distant king. Coffee houses and taverns became hotbeds of revolutionary thought and strategy. Figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were known to be coffee drinkers, because let's be honest, plotting a revolution on sleepy mornings wasn't exactly efficient. "Give me liberty," or "give me coffee," might not be a historical quote, but it should. This caffeinated spirit carried Americans through the Revolutionary War and beyond, cementing coffee's place not just in their cups but in their identity. With the age of empires and exploration, coffee plantations spread worldwide from the Caribbean islands to Central and South America, and eventually Asia and Africa. European powers planted coffee like it was liquid gold, exploiting colonized lands and labor to meet the growing demand of the jittery masses back home. Coffee became more than a drink. It was a commodity that shaped economies, politics, and cultures. Think of the plantations in Brazil and Jamaica, or the bustling coffee markets of Istanbul and Vienna. The world's addiction to coffee was, and still is, a powerful force. Today, coffee culture thrives globally, from hipster cafes in Brooklyn to traditional Turkish coffee rituals. It's a beverage that bridges centuries and continents, connects revolutionaries to baristas, and fuels everything from Nobel lectures to morning meetings you'd rather skip. Let's steam ahead into the modern era, where coffee went from revolutionary fuel to the star of our daily grind, literally. As centuries rolled on, coffee didn't just stay a beverage, it evolved into a global culture all its own. The 19th and 20th centuries brought industrialization, urbanization, and naturally, the rise of the modern coffee house, where espresso machines hissed and the caffeine flowed faster than gossip. Cities like Paris, Vienna, and later New York became legendary for their cafes. These places were no longer just spots for intellectual debate, they became hubs of creativity, fashion, and occasionally terrible poetry. Yes, everyone's first haiku was probably written under the influence of caffeine. Coffee also became big business. The invention of instant coffee during World War II meant soldiers could get their caffeine fix without a fancy French press, and civilians could enjoy a quick cup without leaving the house. It wasn't gourmet, but it did the job, and kept the world buzzing. Fast forward to today, and coffee is everywhere. Specialty coffee shops obsess over single origin beans, baristas have become the new rock stars, and phrases like latte art and third wave coffee are spoken with reverence bordering on cultish. Our modern relationship with coffee is complicated, beautiful, and sometimes a little ridiculous. We rely on it to start our days, survive meetings, and even justify social outings. Let's Grab Coffee is basically an excuse to catch up without the pressure of a full meal. Coffee has spilled over into pop culture like no other drink. From the iconic Central Perk hangouts in Friends to the endless coffee cups of Gilmore Girls, it's clear coffee is the unofficial star of TV and film. And who can forget the Twin Peaks sheriff who was as addicted to his damn fine cup of coffee as he was to solving mysteries? There's even the annual National Coffee Day, which gives us the perfect excuse to drink more caffeine than our ancestors deemed safe. Because if it's national, it must be healthy, right? So why does coffee matter? It's not just about the caffeine kick or the bittersweet taste. Coffee is a story of human connection, of empires and revolutions, art and science, friends and strangers sharing moments over a simple cup. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest things, a bean, a cup, a ritual, can change the world in ways we'd never expect. And if you're still awake after all that history, well, congratulations, you've had way too much coffee.